Welcome to Trampled Underfoot Podcast. We are live.
Episode
Mark,
67.
Trampled Underfoot Fetish.
Yeah, where did that come from, I wondered?
I wrote out Trampled Underfoot, and I stopped at foot, and then I said, "Oh, foot fetish." Just being quirky with the name. We can change it later.
I will. I don't know if you've noticed, I go back to our after we record live and one of us does the edit. It's my edit this week. After one of us does the edit, whichever, I've got a description filled out, and I've got the whole thing ready and raring to go. I'll go in, I'll tag it, I'll put a description, and I put that issue's artwork, and I retitle them all to be in the same format so that it looks cool. It looks like we know what we're doing, and hopefully folks that come across us will go, "Hey, that looks pretty cool. Let's take a listen to these guys," and not just idly pass us by.
Yeah. Well, whatever makes it better, man.
So I don't know, does it make it better? It just, makes it uniform. So the fetish thing will probably go away unless that's the topic we get on.
Well, no, that wasn't the topic at all.
Okay, that's good.
But if you think about it, we don't mention this ever, but we always hide a foot in our artwork.
Uh-huh.
And I felt that it also, underfoot, and then we have the artwork and foot. You could probably say, well, that's kind of a little bit of a I wouldn't say fetish, but
okay, that's a good thing too, because I don't do the artwork. And although I think that's a cool idea, yeah, we have a regular listener, a buddy of ours named by the name of Marsh, and he said something about in episode 2. Well, where's that foot? You should have that foot in there. So Eloy has made it a mission to put that foot in every piece of artwork. It's there in every piece of artwork. Sometimes it's real apparent. Sometimes it's kind of hidden somewhere and woven into something, like it'll be in somebody's hair or something like that. But it's there.
Oh, yeah.
Just a little inside baseball stuff to see, does anybody notice? I like to do that kind of thing. But, it just kind of, let's have a little bit of fun with it anyway.
Well, it adds to the whole thing because, that's what bands used to do. Let's say they'd add all these different elements. You'd have the story written out, the cover art, you'd have the liner notes, then plus the music. There was this whole thing going on. Not to suggest that we're doing some epic thing, but
well, you never know. It may turn out to be epic. We don't know. We're only 3 minutes in. It's early yet.
Yeah. It might turn into a foot thing.
Here's hoping not. So let me just change the subject real quick then. Okay.
Sure.
Now, we have talked about this behind the scenes a little bit, but I don't think I've ever straight up asked you about it. For those who don't know, Eloy is a musician. And I know you play several instruments. I knew about guitar because that's what basically buddied us up, is we're both absolute guitar fanatics, me as a listener and you as a player. I found out a few months later, accidentally insulting you when you put up some music or something like that. I'm like, dude, who plays the keyboard in that? Where'd you get that keyboard? And you're like, dude, I've never been insulted. You played it. I didn't know you played any kind of keyboards at the time.
Yeah.
And you play drums too. So how many instruments do you play?
Well, I mean, so the drums, I can't say that I play the drums. I can keep beats and add it in a recording fashion, but I'm not like proficient at all, right? But I can do the drums for basic things. I can play the keyboards, and that's also a basic, so I could do the chords and stuff, and I supplement when I play music. I supplement in the recording the keyboards, so it's a secondary instrument that I use. Harmonica, also a secondary, more like a Bob Dylan style. I haven't done it in a long time, but I used to add it into my songs, in my recordings. Guitar is my main instrument. and bass is basically just like the guitar, so except for strings.
Yeah.
So those two, and then I'll sing, so that's also an instrument. But really, after that, that's about it, I believe.
That's about it. How many more are there? I mean, without getting into brass or woodwinds or violin or something like that, that's a hell of a lot. And then you got mopes like me who wish you could get proficient with one. I mean, kind of like yourself. Well, shit, not even close to yourself. I played at the drums. You know, I could keep a beat, and that's about it. And I came up with a few fills, and that's about it. Never studied, never took lessons, had a drum kit, and just went in and put on headphones with some music, and I would drum along with it. That's about all.
Yeah.
And so, you know, but where did that come from? Where did you get your start? What made you think you wanted to take up some kind of music? And what was the instrument that you started with?
Well, what happened was that I'm not sure exactly why at this moment, but I told my father I wanted a guitar. Okay. He took me to Ed's Guitar on Bird Road or Coral Way, I think it is. It's Coral Way or Bird Road, I don't remember now. Bird Road. And it could be Coral Way, one of the two. And we walked in, and I wanted to rock and roll, so I wanted an electric guitar, but my dad ended up the guy at the thing, he said, "Look, let me look at your hands." And I was a little kid. He looked at my hands and said, "You got long fingers. You can. That's good for guitar." And he was, you know, pulling our leg, like trying to boost up the ego so that he could sell the darn guitar. And my dad said, being practical, he said, "We want a guitar. He's going to starting off, so we want something to start off with." And I was looking at all these shiny guitars off to the side, and the guy pulls up the Spanish acoustic guitar. And I'm like, "Oh no, I want to rock and roll." and I was like, "Dad," and he says, "No, this is a thing to start. If you get better, then fine, then we'll increase." And then the guy busts out this book, and here he's gonna need this, a Mel Bay learn how to play guitar.
Or like, Mel Bay chord book, yes.
Yeah. Like London Bridge is falling down and stuff like that, you know, and it's like, so he bought it. I was happy, but I was driving in the car, and he says, "I hope that you learn and you study and read the book, because that costs money." And I'm sitting in the car driving home, and I'm like, "Oh crap." So I got home and I opened up the book and I started, you know, it teaches you how to do it. And it's like, ding, 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 ding. And after like a couple of days of that, I tossed the book in a fit of not fury, but like, I'm like, what the book, there was something that wasn't sparking, and the guitar was fine, but the book wasn't fine. And what happened was that, to me at least, it's not about that following the structure. It's about the spark and the fire. Okay. And the spark and the fire will force you to go in the direction of acquiring the skill and knowledge. But if you are forced, you know, it's like drinking cod liver, you know. And so, long story short, what got me to start learning was that I think I bought a Doors book or a Beatles book or both, and started learning Beatles and Doors songs on the acoustic.
The songbooks?
The songbooks with the tablature. And I started, but it wasn't like I was proficient or anything. It wasn't until I got into a band, and I couldn't really play, and they said, "You're going to be the bass player." They gave me a bass, they gave me a book, study these things, and you're the bass player. And I went and played badly, and everybody turned their back away from me. The band sort of like became like this little unit, and I was sitting there with the bass, all couldn't do anything, couldn't keep. And I swore to myself that I practiced every day, night and day. And it became so to the point where I could do virtually anything. I could play. I could write my own songs and do all the stuff that I need to do to create music. Not like, you know, Eddie Van Halen, but I can create a full song.
And then you started, and that's when you started writing music, or so about how old were you about that time?
I must have been 14, 15, 16 years old when I started to write little songs and little stuff. When I got into 17, 18, I started to, and then we bought this 4-track Fostack recorder. I started to record in layers. And my mom saw that I had an interest, and she took me to see my cousin, which was blind, but he had a master's degree in music recording engineering and could play all. And things started to evolve from there, and I started playing. And it started from there.
And that was Felix, right?
That was Felix.
That was Felix. Okay, yeah, we've talked about Felix before.
Yeah,
I that's how I remembered. Ha ha ha. So how old were you when you got that guitar and decided that's what you wanted to do?
I don't know that I decided to. What I wanted to do was anything that I wanted to do. But I wanted to do that in my mind, but I couldn't do it. So I was probably 12, 13.
When you got the guitar?
When I got the guitar. It could have been older. I can't remember exactly. Anywhere from 12 to 14 years old to be safe within that sort of thing. It could have been younger though. But there was no spark, because the force of this is what you have to do. And it's like, I didn't see the rock and roll, and I wanted to rock and roll, man. And I didn't see it. I don't see it in the Mel Bay book. I'm sorry. It's just like, and, but you don't have to even be proficient.
Mm-hmm.
There's a spark that's inside that it just propels you to do. So you don't have to be proficient. Now, I'm not saying that being proficient isn't useful. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that without a spark, even if you're proficient, it's soulless.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you there, but it still comes down to me anyway, because I also tried to learn it about that time, and I have funky finger joints and short stubby fingers, but I could never get my hands to move that fast. I mean, you still have to know how to form your fingers to make a G7 chord, or you still have to know where the scales are and how to play them. So you can kind of map that fretboard in your brain. And I never got that good at it, because I could never be fast enough to keep that going at a steady rhythm. It's just what it's like to be me. And I've tried several times. I got okay at about age 12. And then I don't even remember what happened. Something happened to the guitar. Oh, I do too remember what happened. The bridge came loose. It was just a little acoustic, a little $20 acoustic out of a pawn shop guitar. The bridge popped off, and it was too expensive to get fixed. My father said no, he wasn't putting the money into fixing it or getting another one, even though I was practicing every day, and it just kind of went by the wayside until I was in my 20s. And then by that time, I thought I knew everything, and just various reasons I never pursued it. But I know that you played locally. You played a lot of gigs locally. You were in a couple of different bands, and then did some performing out in California and everything, and then came back. And then just life, the universe, and everything caught up, and things changed. But have you ever thought about getting back into it?
Months ago, or maybe last year, a friend that drums called me or messaged me, because nowadays you know why bother calling? You can computer message, and there was a little back and forth, and I said, okay, send me the. He said, we already have a guitarist, so we just need a singer, and I thought of you, and it's a paying gig, and let me send you our list, our set lists. And he sent it to me, and I looked. Journey, all like singers, like wah! Doing that.
Yeah.
I'm looking at that, and by the way, the keys in which these guys sing are outrageous.
Yeah. Steve Perry is one hell of a vocalist. Glad he's back.
So now here's the thing. Oh, I love I'm subscribed to his channel. I looked at that, and now incidentally, I could do that, but the amount of that's where I'd have to sit and practice like when I was young to do that. So I can actually so I could sing like I Remember You by Skid Row, let's say, which I practiced a little bit. I did a little clip on my channel and stuff, or on my Facebook, and I could do, but now I have to sit and actually work at it. And I don't know that I want to do that. I said, dude, how about some blues numbers and some, good old
Here's Eloy, back to the blues, man.
Well, see, the whole thing was that he says, "Oh no, just do just do as best you can, no problem." Like he had confidence in, and I thought about it and I said, "Well, do I really want to be standing and playing at a bar in Miami and going from one place?" It's just, I thought to myself, nah, not really. I really don't want to do that. I really don't want to do it. I prefer doing in studio recordings and whatnot, and this whole live thing. I did that, but it's like, Harju said something. It's just practice and all that for hours, and it is. But without the you have to have the spirit, that little spirit that says, yeah, because my goal is I want, and you have to have that illusion in your mind, and that sort of like. Yeah. You have to have a certain fairy tale in your mind that you believe in so much that it pushes you unreasonably forward to learn the craft that you're involved in.
Yeah. But now, would you say that it's true that you have to have somebody there to kind of guide you, especially when you don't know what you're doing?
No, it's not true.
It's not.
I had no one.
So at all.
I had no one. I could say that I learned on my own.
Okay, what I mean by that is there, maybe not in a technical ability or things like that, but there are certain things that you need to know about the instrument that you don't just gather from osmosis.
Well, what I did was I would go to the library and I would look up, and like I'd get a book on chords and I'd open it up and I'd look at all those chords and I'd be like, holy crap, look at all those chords. And I'd gather and then I'd listen to records and I'd find little phrases and I'd gather these things and I'd start to try to implement. But what the problem is that there's all this, look, I'm a different case probably. For many people, it would probably go better if a teacher sat with them and this and that. But for me, I need to discover it like I'm on the ocean rowing. And it sounds asinine because wouldn't it be better that the island with the golden monkey sitting there with a treasure chest right in front of you? But I want, there's a certain struggle. It's an adventure. It's a voyage.
Yeah.
And you need people, I guess. Most people would. I did it a different way.
Okay.
So I can basically create what the heck I want. Like I could put together whatever I want musically.
Okay.
But I have limited. I learned how to read music on my own badly.
That was going to be my next question: is do you know how to read music?
I'd have to sit with it for maybe a week to refresh because I don't have the skill of quickly. But I learned how to do it on my own. But since I don't use it, I don't use it. I just jot down the basic, but it's useful to do so. So yeah, I'm not.
So when you write a piece, it's up here first. It has to be up here first. I mean, you're not just picking a letter out of a bag and going, okay, we're going to start with an F, and play around there. It's got to be up here first. Do you sit down and you kind of just in longhand, regular writing, write out like a chord progression or something like that? I want to go C, G, A, and go from there and then start embellishing? Or do you sit down with a blank staff and write individual notes or individual chord notations? How do you put that together?
Yeah, I grab the guitar,
Uh-huh.
usually sitting on the chair, leaning back, as undisciplined as hell, and I start strumming, and I'll sing "Why'd She Leave Me" or some crap like that, and then I'll say, "Oh, what that's brilliant," and then I'll go down that line and try to figure a little melody, and little by little I start writing a story. Meanwhile, I'm writing the chords down so that I don't forget the darn thing. Sometimes I remember it. You know what I'm saying? And I just keep it in my mind, the chord structure, and then they get lost. So it's better to write things.
Do you record yourself while you're doing this? Just sitting around playing around?
I have, and I'm glad I did, because I have a truckload of songs that I played and said so I don't forget them. So I have all these little clips of pieces that I could eventually
go in and flesh out.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. That's very cool. See, I'm interested in the mind behind that because I never got to that point. My brain just doesn't work that way. It just, for some reason. I mean, I could look back in the day. I was looking at guitarists like, oh, hell, pick one, David Gilmour. I was looking at people like that. And at the time, we had no YouTube. We had no VCRs. We had no... You were watching things as they came up on TV.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to remember now if it was Friday night or Saturday night. I want to say it was Friday night. You had the midnight special hosted by Wolfman Jack, and they had various different groups on just playing live versions of their top 40 hits. And then you had Don Kirshner's rock concert that usually featured one performer or two. And then you had the occasional special like Alice Cooper, Welcome to My Nightmare, which was on ABC, regular broadcast television, which was huge for the day. So you're watching those performers. And it's kind of sort of like you said you wanted to rock and roll. But with me, I took some lessons because number one, you need to know which is the loud end. You needed to know how to tune the ding dong thing. I'm tone deaf as hell, so that's against me big time. And so I couldn't get my fingers to do the things that I want them to do. So I never developed it. Yeah, I probably should have kept up with it and just, kept screaming and hollering until Dad finally caved and got the guitar fixed, or somehow got another guitar and then gone from there, simply because I never really developed it where you did. You went and developed further,
Here's the thing about, and there's a lot of musicians out there, in droves, and guitarists, abound and all that. But talking about American music and it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing, but let's talk like in American music, what it comes down to is, for me, because there's maybe two branches of it. You have the feel and vibe that is not part of the blues. Originally, you have that sort of, I guess you'd say, this Irish folklore thing that turns into, eventually this very American mountain and country sort of sound, and then you have this completely opposite thing, the mountain thing or country thing broadly is kind of like stories of sadness, just the same, like you'd get in the, however, stories, and yet there's joy and rejoicing, but there's an element that just doesn't exist in its delivery that occurs in the blues. And so I fell completely into that category with the blues, but it was easy to do because you have, growing up, all these bands that derive from the blues, not from country.
Right.
Although there's country elements in it, but they derive from blues. that that element or that soul or that sort of I guess rhythm that is used in the blues which is a shuffle, creates a retarded tempo and then an accelerated tempo, and there's something off about it that creates a certain vibe. This back and forth with the chun 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 chun. There's something there. So all these bands, all these rock bands use that they use it. I mean, so what happened was I realized something with the guitar, which was that when you play a chord and you want to move to another chord, that long scratching down the highway to the next chord that a lot of people, kids struggle with is nothing but one chord, and you let freedom in, and then you release your hand, or you just mute it and just roll down, and at the same time you're scratching, and there's no sound produced note wise, but you're scratching that guitar and that hole in the middle, that space when you get to the other chord, scratching fills it in so it sounds cool, and you sound like you're actually playing a nice little transition. And that's what the pros do, but I did it because I heard it's just something, and in that little space, that scratching, that's where you have soul. It's not the actual chords, it's the stops and the this and that where creates the and when I discovered that, it became easy for me, because I said, oh yeah, I'm just going to strike a chord and I'm going to and back to the next chord and back to, and once I found that trick out, boom, it opened up the door.
Yeah. See, I never got that far. Everything I know about music, or think I know about music, I learned as an adult. And I was in my 20s before I figured out in my brain that the basis of all rock and roll was blues. I was a blues fan by then. I liked the blues, but I never had that light bulb moment where it clicked that Johnny B. Good is that blues shuffle sped up to 120 beats per minute from the usual 40. And it's like, it is that same shuffle. Listen to it. Do, 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 do. No, it's do, 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 do. I get it now. But by that time, I had gotten away from instruments and just became more of a listener. I still have things going on in my brain up here. I just got no way of putting them down. But, when I got into building these little 3-string cigar box guitars and what have you, I can pick one up and I can make chords. I can play not so much a melody as I can sit on the front porch, strum, make musical noises that please me. And so far the neighbors haven't complained, but that's as far as I ever went, But then again, when I'm listening, I think my favorite quote of all, and I don't remember who said it, was, I don't always play AC/DC, but when I do, my neighbors hear it too.
One of the biggest things also when guitarists start off is that, like, I remember thinking, and then you realize that there's no way you can reproduce it by yourself in a room without a drummer, keyboards, and stuff. But you think to yourself, I want to sound just like Kirk Hammett in Metallica, let's say. Because you hear him, but you're hearing him with all the instrument. You're hearing him with everybody full throttle in a perfect, beautiful production. And in the kid's head, he's like, well, crap, man, why am I? And, so you can, I guess you could do it now because there's all this automation and stuff. So you could probably, but the whole idea is that you want to be rock and roll. I mean, at least for me, and that's a very Americana thing. And it's just a rock and it's spread throughout the world. It's everywhere. I mean, what else but rock and roll? I mean, except now, which is what electronic, which is fine too, but
right.
But yeah.
I don't know. It's more along the case of, oh man, I don't know. It's just the development of that mind, because I can see where you're getting at. The Mel Bay book is full of all kinds of folk songs. It's full of all kinds of simple, basic tunes to get a person started. But I guess over and over, excuse me, not over and over. I guess above all else, it's to get you to learn those chords where they are on the fretboard and be able to develop that muscle memory needed to make those chord formations with your fingers that I never really got proficient at. I mean, the biggest panic attack for me was an F on a fretboard because I just could not get my fingers to do that. Now, I haven't tried lately. I don't know. I don't have I've got several 6 strings here. I could probably try again, but it was never impressed into me to practice. I wouldn't put the damn thing down, but I wasn't practicing the lesson that I was given. I was just sitting there trying to make music. And this was before there were looping pedals. This is before computers and all that other kind of stuff. So you're right. When you're listening to a Jim Croce tune, like Bad Bad Leroy Brown, there's more than one guitarist playing there. And to my untrained ear, I'm trying to figure out how the heck is he doing all that stuff? Well, he isn't. They are.
Yeah.
And that took me a while to figure out as well.
It's a bigger picture, but going back to Harju, he does have I don't want to disqualify it because he does have, so you do need to spend time with the instrument as a young guitarist, but so because the more familiarized the more you do it, it is true. It becomes like really second nature. So there is that to it.
Uh-huh.
But by the time if a kid starts, like I started, it's funny. I started because I wanted to write songs like the Beatles.
Okay.
Right? And I was going to say that, but you change, and I still like the Beatles, right? So it's like there was no change. But you start off in one place and you don't know where you end up as you travel down that journey of playing guitar. But it's kind of like, for me, playing guitar, okay, that's cool. But I like the idea of, not just because of the guitar, I like the idea of songs.
Right.
Like I like the idea of songs. I'm the guitar itself, okay, cool, but it's only a tool for a song,
Yeah. And, the reason I laugh is because everything is relative, and I know. But to hear somebody who already knows how to play and can pick up a guitar and play a tune, maybe you don't know every tune out there.
I definitely don't know.
But if somebody says to me, hey, man, could you play Yesterday by the Beatles? I'm sunk. I'm dead. I don't know how to play a song. I can pick up and I can strum and I can make up words as I'm going. And I will never remember them again. Never.
I was sitting on the dock in Santa Monica trying to make money, and a guy came like I'm playing, and the guy comes up and, can you play me this song? I got $20 for you. I said, no. How about this song? He said,
didn't work, huh?
No, he said, okay. He gave me the $20, and I played him another song because I just couldn't play that song he was asking for.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Everybody has limitations, and I get that.
Well, you have to learn it. You have to actually sit and practice whatever that song is. Yeah.
Exactly. But you also have to know the chords before you can do that. So that was where I got that, and I can't sing worth a ding dong. So the difference between me and millions of other people is I'm willing to admit that I can't sing. I don't feel the need to prove it in public. So I avoid karaoke like crazy. But okay, so you never, you wanted to play the rock and roll. You wanted to play with a band and just enjoy the music and make the music. Did you, I'm sure as a kid, everybody who is trying to learn an instrument has dreams of being up on stage with, thousands of screaming groupies throwing themselves at you and stuff like that. But did you ever want to pursue the career in music, doing the big live arenas and doing the record deals and all that other good stuff? Or
Well,
Did
that's
that ever appeal to you?
yeah, that was always our dreams and stuff.
Mhm.
I mean, but it was for me. It was more like whatever. It's weird for me. It was like, yeah, if it happens, I'm doing what I want. I'm creating this music, and I looked at it like art.
Mhm.
But it's funny because I was walking down 107th back in the day with my friend Ernie, and we're walking, and this was the time of like in the 80s, like, and it was like all heavy metal,
Mhm.
and I don't know why, but I had in my mind like Cheap Trick, the band, and which everybody wanted heavy metal at that time as kids.
Right.
And my friend says, "Yeah, man, and we're gonna dress up like rockers and black and this and that." And I'm walking and said, "Yeah, man, I'm gonna have a suit on." And he's like, "What?"
Be that one guy, huh?
He said, "No, you're not." I said, "What do you mean?" And in my mind, I was thinking like Cheap Trick for
Right.
some reason. Well, he wouldn't have it. He was like, "What? No, that's unacceptable." So it's kind of a silly thing, It's in the end, it's fun,
Well, everybody has a gimmick. I mean, look at what Angus Young did for the schoolboy outfit. I mean, come on. And
A checkered plaid suit. I could have been in dangerous. What you call this guy? What's this guy that you always talk about in the loincloth?
Ted Nugent.
Yeah, just shy of that. We're a clown costume and stuff.
Yeah, a red plaid suit with a red roadster cap, and you'd have been set. And just sit back and don't say nothing. be the brooding band member, Well, the reason I asked that is because I know a lot of people and I know a few people that can play. That's not what they wanted. They wanted to play for themselves. And maybe, for friends or family, stuff like that. But they wanted to learn to be able to play themselves so they could play music when they wanted to play it and just have fun playing.
I always wanted an album
Mm-hmm.
to have the art of it and it be out there and it be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be the thing. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to,
yeah,
sure, I wasn't opposed to playing live and stuff, but
right.
That it would be that an album, and that was the representation of the art and the stuff, which it's easy to do now. I've been contemplating it, getting, I've got some ideas, but I'd have to reorganize. I got like freaking supplies that I would have to purchase to get my my gig going again because I've got old equipment.
Yeah.
But
there are people out there paying thousands of dollars for old equipment, so
Well, what I mean is, like, I've got one speaker that's busted; it won't turn on.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how much. So I got a cable that crackles.
Yeah, it should kind of be functional. Yeah.
So I got to get those things. I mean, I could record, right? But the one cable I have to replace.
Yeah.
So I can plug things in, and they're not like when I'm playing, click,
Yeah.
And I got to do that,
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, now, so you got into writing your own songs and writing your own music. And I'm sure, and it's used a lot, and it's a cliche or anything, but I'm sure other songwriters gave you ideas, gave you impressions, or just gave you a mood or a vibe that you kind of fed off of.
Oh, yeah.
Who did you kind of look up to? Who were your heroes when it came to songwriting? Maybe not necessarily technical ability, but I mean the ability to tell stories.
Everybody in the rock universe, the Beatles, not the Rolling Stones, Jimi Hendrix, Bob Dylan, Eric Clapton, a lot, like a lot. Eric Clapton was huge for me. Okay. Huge because, well, just huge. From Cream, from Eric Clapton doing blues to Cream to Layla, Derek and the Dominoes to him solo and all it's like, what? It just, Eric Clapton was huge, but the Beatles were huge. The Beach Boys were freaking, a lot of people would say, oh, why are you listening to the Beach Boys? Because it's kind of like, sensitive. Because there's a psychedelic element, and psychedelic is very important. in for me in music, and that whole concept of the Doors were huge for me because there was this forbidden sort of dark world, and so that was big for me. A bunch of bands, but those were probably like the biggest ones that I can remember now. But yeah, dude, Rocket, all of them, they were all awesome, and they'd write liner notes, and you could sit and read them, and there were stories, and you'd imagine, and oh my goodness, it just isn't that. I mean, to me, that's what it was all about. Plus the music, you're listening to it and you're reading the liner notes.
Right.
Damn, dude, that was good stuff. And I was a fan. You know what I'm saying? And I was a fan, and I was playing because I was like, oh man, I want to be like the Beatles. Oh man, I want to be like Jimi Hendrix. Oh man, I want to be Stevie Ray Vaughan. I have all the tab books,
right?
Stacked in the freaking laundry room from back then.
Yeah.
And I was a fan, I'm a fan of that.
But there wasn't one specific songwriter that, if push come to shove, if you could only play one person's music other than your own from now until the end of time, without one songwriter, who would it be? Who was your favorite? Who do you think just kind of touched you the most, the deepest?
One songwriter above all?
Mm-hmm.
Damn, Mark.
We ask the tough questions.
Yeah, to me, it had to be the Beatles, dude.
Okay.
It had to be the Beatles because I forgot. Although they weren't an influence me playing, but Queen, dude, Queen.
Yeah.
My friend George one day we would do that a lot. We'd bring over and trade cassettes, and he came and he had maybe on his Walkman, I don't know what, he had Queen. I said, oh, dude, can I borrow that so that I could record my own tape? You know what I'm saying? Copy it.
Yeah.
And he loaned me the Queen. It was like the best of.
Uh-huh.
And I played it, dude. And like every song, it's like, and the voice, I was like, what the hell is going on here? And it's just all these, dude, I just love the rock and roll, Yeah.
That was one of the little known things about Queen, or maybe little known in my world anyway. Each and every member of that band was a platinum quality solo performer. Every one of them could sing their hearts out. Everyone was a master of their instruments. And when they coalesced and put it all together, I mean, it was just dynamite. It was that combination. And that's what it took. How they all came about and how they all managed to get together, I don't know. But I mean, the world is glad that they did. But Queen was more than just Freddie Mercury. It was largely Freddie Mercury. But Freddie Mercury was just the front man. I mean, Brian May could sing his heart out too. So
he could. They were all fantastic. And yes, Brian May and his songs were all, but Freddie had just a magic, man. It just, yes, they were all savages, but Freddie Mercury, there was, when he sings, there's a video of a lady and she's an operatic singer.
Yes.
Have you seen it?
I've seen several. There are several different vocal coaches and opera coaches and music teachers and everything. I mean, just analyzing, and that's a rabbit hole I get into a year ago, and I still get notifications when they post new videos.
well, check this out. There's this. Oh, go ahead.
Just analyzing everything he did. I mean, things from Live Aid or what have you. It just absolutely fantastic stuff when they break down his ability, his vocal control, his range, everything. And that's good stuff to watch. Here's
what I wanted to get out about that this lady, she analyzes his thing and she closes her eyes and when he's reaching certain notes and this and that. And there's parts when he's doing live where he's not doing a perfect operatic. He's pushing the voice over and it's not quite technically proper and this and she explains in not so many words, and she excuses it by saying, oh, but overall, but she mentions little areas where Freddie would, and so I understood what she was saying. But here's the thing: as operatic, and I'm not saying this about her specifically, but as operatic as one person can be, flawless, let's say,
right,
Freddie was doing these operatic, but he had soul.
Right.
He had that blues. And that was all. So you could have flaws. And I'm not saying that Freddie, but he did have certain situations.
Sure.
But it didn't matter because it's rock and it's just, there's something that cradles that into a category of its own. So you have these operetics that have to be flawlessly, and that's fine, but there's something over there. And that's there's a difference.
Freddie was a prima donna big time. He believed his own hype. He lived his own hype, and he's the first one to admit it. I mean, look at the interviews where it basically kind of gets around to that question is politely not being asked. He'll admit it. Look, I know I'm a prima donna, and I know I believe my own.
He did it flirting all the way. I mean,
exactly.
He was like a jitty.
Do it. But he also had the ability. I mean, Pavarotti was a huge prima donna. I mean, everything had to be perfect. And if it wasn't spot on perfect, he took it personally as a humiliation. If he didn't feel his performance was 100% top shelf that night, he wanted no record of that performance ever to be out there because he took it as a personal insult. Freddie had the ability to move on. It's done. It's over. It's out there. That's me. That's who I am. That's who we are. Get past it. Get over it. Let's go on to the next one, and let's have fun along the way. So,
yeah, it's just amazing.
And I wasn't trying to take anything at all away from Freddie Mercury. I was just saying that the combination of all those people together is what made that group click, because all of them were stellar performers in their own right, and when they put it all together, it was explosive.
Oh yeah.
So that's the point that I was trying to get at.
Well, it's like the Beatles together, in my opinion, they're a force to be reckoned with. And if apart, I choose Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
By far.
I'm with you there. John Lennon would run a close second. George Harrison, obviously. George and Ringo were pretty underrated as far as I'm concerned. But it would definitely have to be McCartney because, he just didn't know when to quit, and he won't quit, and the world's a better place for it. But he just kept going and kept going. And he never tried to, I mean, they did experiment and they did push the limits and they did push themselves artistically, musically, just as a person. But he didn't feel the need to reinvent himself or change his style. He was comfortable with himself, comfortable where he was, and he just kept going. He would experiment here or there, but there was no reinvention, is what I'm getting at. You could imagine the Beatles take just about any tune from his solo career. You can imagine the Beatles up on stage playing that tune, because although it didn't sound like a Beatles tune, you could imagine the Beatles playing it and making it a quote unquote Beatles tune. He was such a driving force behind that group.
Paul was look, John Lennon was rock and roll all the way, but so was Paul. But as far as getting it together and putting a piece together and adding, Paul McCartney was a complete songwriter. John Lennon was a straightforward rocker. Although he had some crazy ideas and stuff too. One time he wanted to be suspended. I think it was that he wanted some sort of, I think it was for that song on Revolver, that, that song at the end that's sort of like a swirling seagulls, the sounds at the end, turn off your mind, relax and roll downstream.
Okay.
What's that song? Do you know?
I can't think of it. There are so many hundreds of Beatles tunes. I can't think of which one it is.
Well, I think he wanted to sink a microphone into like with a bag into the water and turn himself upside hang himself on the roof and sing into it that way so he could get a different effect. And the engineers were like, John, that's just not. They said they didn't know how to tell him that wouldn't work, because once you submerge the microphone in water, the sound waves, you're just gonna get a globally glob, of and so stuff like it. So he was creative, and so I'm not taking anything away from John, but for me, the amount of awesomeness at just stellar levels in songs is Paul McCartney all the damn way.
Okay.
I can't, I just can't. And I guess we agree.
I can't disagree with that. I really can't. I can't fault anything that you had just said. I can't disagree with any of it either. Now, is there somebody else more recent that you can think of that would be close to being on the same level? Two things come to my mind right away. Two people come to my mind right away. But as far as influencing other people, making an impact on music, and maybe have the same storytelling ability as well as just musicality in your mind. Nobody else? I mean, the two that come to my mind right off the top of my head are Paul Simon and Billy Joel.
Oh, that's a good one.
Paul Simon and Billy Joel both are fantastic storytellers. Paul Simon more cryptic at times than Billy Joel. I mean, Billy Joel will come out and just title a song, Scenes from an Italian Restaurant, and that's what it is. Or something like A Matter of Trust, which I think is very, very underrated. That's an underrated Billy Joel song.
Oh, it's an awesome song.
I dig that tune.
The thing about Billy Joel, here's the thing about Billy Joel that I perceive. Number one, he's badass. So and he's one of my favorites. And I'm glad you brought it up. There's an attitude in his vocal performances that's just putting it out there. He just lets it loose in his style, his vocal style. And he's also very appreciative of the 50s doo-wop groups and that sound. And there's a nostalgia that he modernized, or he brought into, modern times. And so you can see he's a fan of music, and he just passionately throws it out in his style. So it's almost like rudely saying, if you think that I've been lost, then let's remember. He just tosses it up, and he's like, he's playing with it. He's having fun with it. He's a badass. Yep. Paul Simon is an introspective, another bad to the bone, introspective songwriter with a lot of clever, well put together. He paints pictures,
right?
Creates stories within the time frame of a song, and it's just fantastic, dude. I agree with all of it.
But Paul Simon makes you think. Paul Simon doesn't so much tell a story as he lays out a plot line for you and makes you think about it to tell the story yourself.
Well, yeah.
Whereas Billy Joel will tell you the story. I mean, the first Billy Joel song I ever heard was Piano Man. I think that's probably the same for a lot of people of my generation. And that was based on his time playing in piano bars, coming up in the business. But he told the whole story about what was going on at that particular moment in time with what he had experienced. And there was nothing left to doubt in your mind. You knew exactly what he was talking about. You only had to hear the lyrics 2 or 3 times. You had them all down and you knew the story. But Paul Simon made you think about it. I mean, The Sound of Silence, there's probably 300 interpretations of that song. Probably the only song I can think of that has more interpretations would be Don McLean's American Pie. But that's because he was always so cryptic about it and wouldn't explain it for so many years. He finally did explain it. But and it turns out most of the things people we're talking about was correct, but he filled in the backstory on it. But anyway,
My favorite Paul Simon. I'm one track mind. Paul Simon albums were, well, Simon and Garfunkel included, was Bridge Over Troubled Water.
excellent album.
The whole album is freaking awesome. I love, what is it? I love Graceland, even though it was later on. Well, I would listen to it when it came out, and it was just mind blowing, and lyrically and all that. Graceland, and I love, what is the one, where it's, I met my old lover on the street last night. She seemed so glad to see me. I just smiled.
I don't remember.
Still crazy after all these years.
Still crazy after all of these years. That was a good album too. I heard parts of it. I never owned it. Kodachrome was actually an underrated album too.
Well, awesome. Hearts and Bones. There's another album called Hearts and Bones.
Yeah.
It's awesome, and it was underrated as well. But the lyrics, Paul McCartney, man. Paul Simon, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Another one that is basically lost to time, except for real true fans of his music, was Harry Chapin. Folks might remember WOLD. They will remember the Cats in the Cradle.
Oh, okay.
But
now I know.
But he was such a storyteller. His problem was all of his songs were so long and the stories were so intricate that he couldn't get any radio play. I mean, they had to cut a verse out of WOLD to get it there. They had to cut out a lot of the music. It was the same with Cats in the Cradle. They had to trim it down to get it into the radio format. But you get a tune like All My Life's a Circle, or I Want to Learn a Love Song, or what was the other one? Oh my gosh, I could sing it, but I'm going to save everybody that. I'm trying to remember the title of it. A Better Place to Be, it's called. These are 8, 10, 12, 13-minute stories set to music that are just absolutely fantastic. And but the thing about Harry Chapin was his best performances were always live. So a lot of his studio work went unnoticed. It was his live performances that, an excellent double album set was called Harry Chapin Greatest Stories Live. And I wore out 2 copies of that album. I mean, it just, from front to back, first track to last track, excellent stuff.
So you got really into his music, huh?
Oh, big time. Big time. I mean, his brother, Tom, this dates me also. There was a Saturday morning TV show on ABC called Make a Wish. And his brother, Tom Chapin, was the host and presenter of that. And it was all live action. And it was little vignettes all put together with some music in between. He's out there playing a guitar, but then he did voiceover, and he would talk about like how a road was built or how this city got to be so big, or just little simple things like that. So it was educational and instructional, but he made it fun. And he was a good singer and a good guitarist, but it was more along the folk thing. And it just, a total departure from what I was used to. And so his brother Harry, when I heard a couple of his songs, I'm like, wait a minute, man, I got to get into that and listen to it. He had another tune called Taxi that was a story of, he's driving a taxi cab and he picks up this woman, and they discover that this woman was his childhood sweetheart. They were high school sweethearts. They went their separate ways years later, and she just happens to get into his taxi, and he takes her home and lets her out, and she goes on, and they go on their separate ways.
So you're working in a taxi now, Al?
No, not even nothing like that, nothing like that. But it was so popular with his fans that he actually years later came along and he wrote a sequel to that story and named it Sequel. And forever people were screaming, you have to play those together. You have to play those together. And for certain concerts, he would. But usually the way he did it, he played one and then half hour later in the show, he would play the other just to give you that separation, that anticipation. Yeah.
Let me say, go ahead. I'm sorry. I was just going to
say, if you get a chance to listen to any Harry Chapin, man, you will absolutely love it.
You mentioned right now when you were explaining this with the TV show from back in the day, you said that, I don't want to date myself, right?
You looked it up.
No, I didn't look it up. But as you went through the explaining this, I thought to myself, those songs, notice how the timeline of our existence, because we're literally holding the torches. All of us here, are literally, for whatever it's worth, though we're holding the library cards, the torches of the moment, and moving on to the next generation as we go with that information and cultural, whatever you want to call it, all that cultural information, I guess we could say, and its meanings and its feelings and the imagery that it all of it. And my question to you is, the music that you grew up listening to, which is consumed by, let's say, 10 years down the road, roughly, give or take, my generation, let's say, from when you were listening to these things and the imagery that it brought to you and the meaning, considering the time in which you were consuming that music and the things that were happening in society around you and all that, how, like, now a guy like me in the 80s growing up consuming that same similar music, do you think I'm receiving the message? Are there things that were lost even though it's concretely there?
Yeah. I don't mean you personally, but I mean as a generational thing. Take something as innocent and innocuous as the Monkees' Last Train to Clarksville. All right. That's got to be, that borderlines on bubblegum pop. Okay. But if you listen to the lyric and you know when it was written and you know a little bit, Clarksville. Where is Clarksville? It's Clarksville, Tennessee. Clarksville, Tennessee is right out the main gate of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, the 101st Airborne Division. He's telling his girl, take the last train to Clarksville.
And I'll meet you at the station.
I'll meet you at the station. I've hurry up and get here because I've got to go. I don't know if I'm ever coming home. He's on his way to war. This was the Vietnam era, but people just hear that catchy beat. Take the last train to Clarksville and I'll meet you at the station. They're not picking up the message. This guy doesn't know if he's ever going to see his woman again.
It was so poppy when I would listen to it coming up and on the radio, it would come on, that I dig it, but the meaning that you just described, just completely, it's in my mind, it was just a guy and a chick and there's the train station, and that's it. But that you just, and so, that's a good answer to the question.
There's a lot of music like that. There's a lot of songs like that. Songs of the 60s. Now, I know you growing up, you consider yourself an 80s rock fan. And
I consider myself of the 80s. I do.
Okay.
I'm not an adult in the 80s.
No. Understood. But that's when your musical taste was being developed. I mean, it's like you said, you were all about the metal all the time and you're listening to Anthrax and Rat and, all these guys. So that didn't exist when I was growing up. It was being invented. Nobody really heard that until Black Sabbath's Paranoid came out. And then it was, oh my God, what the hell is this? You know? And rock started to make that divide from rock and roll to rock to metal. I keep moving my hands over here. I got to remember the camera's right there.
Yeah.
It started making that divide from rock and roll to rock and roll and rock, and then also adding metal in there. And it wasn't even called metal then. That phrase hadn't really been coined. So it split off into different directions. And what we were left with was what was being played on AM Top 40. And there were still standards that radio stations and TV stations had to abide by. So growing up in the Bay Area in the 60s, I witnessed the anti-war protests. I witnessed the Berkeley riots. I mean, I watched protest marches against the Vietnam War go down the street in front of my house as a, 6 and 7 year old kid sitting up there facing backwards off the couch, leaning against the couch, looking out the front window. And my mom paranoid a rock was going to come through it or something. And so the music that was coming out at that time, a lot of anti-establishment, a lot of anti-war stuff, and the radio stations had to be selective about what they played. You did hear Dylan. You did hear the Byrds, Turn, Turn, Turn.
Mm-hmm.
That had kind of a anti-war message without being a flagrant in-your-face, hell no, we won't go kind of a thing. So without having that context to kind of base these songs on, like Fortunate Son by Creedence Clearwater,
right,
without having that context, you're kind of left wondering, what the hell is he trying to say? These lyrics don't make sense.
Well, that one I did get.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of...
Yeah. And so much has been made of it too.
But it was the feeling of it, or the gravity of it at the time it came out, because of the circumstances, was like, ding, 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 obvious. It's okay. It's interesting. Yeah.
But if you go back and look at the lyrics of some of the most innocent songs you wouldn't even think of, like Last Train to Clarksville.
Yeah.
You wouldn't,
a good example, by the way.
You wouldn't really understand and get that. It's like, take the last train to Clarksville, and I must hang up the phone. What? It doesn't mean anything. It's kind of like, you've heard Johnny Rivers, Memphis, Tennessee, long distance information. That reveal at the end when you find out Maria's only 6 years old. And it's like, when he says his mom did not agree, that was his woman, but he wants to talk to his little girl. It's like, oh crap, the song has a whole new meaning now. It was figuring out on my own that, like Last Train to Clarksville, I was stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and lived in Clarksville, Tennessee. That's when it hit me, and I started listening to the lyrics, and it's like, oh, it all falls into place now.
There was a lot of, and by the way, just thinking about it, my dad was not a fan of the hippies at all. He told me back then, he was I told him, we talked about it one time when he was still alive, and he said, oh yeah, all I remember from them is that they were sitting on lawns and they were all dirty. That's all he said. Because my dad was more into
well, that's what my dad said too. And
getting it done,
they were all around us growing up. Like I said, in the San Francisco Bay Area, Haight-Ashbury district, where all the hippies were in San Francisco, was a tourist attraction. I mean, you could my grandmother came down to visit us from Oregon with my Aunt Sue, and they wanted to go to San Francisco and go to Haight-Ashbury and see the hippies. Just drive through. Okay, fine. So we did Fisherman's Wharf, and we did Chinatown and this, that, and the other. And we cruised through Haight-Ashbury at like 2:00 in the afternoon. And my grandmother was just absolutely scandalized by what she saw there. And there was nothing inappropriate, nothing that we would think of as X-rated or R-rated or even heavy PG-13 rated. I mean, everybody was fully clothed. They weren't screaming anything or doing anything like that. But she couldn't get past the long hair, the tie-dye, and men wearing bandanas. That's for women. Women wear bandanas, and they also have that long hair.
That's fun.
And, you know, and my aunt was like, they're so dirty. They're so dirty. Well, you couldn't see any obvious signs that nobody had bathed or anything. And
Right.
how do you know they didn't just get out of the shower? I mean, you're making some pretty broad assumptions there.
They probably did. They probably bathe 5 times a day.
Well, who knows? I mean, I don't know. But that was the joke back at the time. Hippies were just smelly, nasty, dirty, filthy people that didn't bathe, didn't cut their hair. So they must have been unclean and unkempt because they were unkempt, you know. But it was a tourist attraction. It took you a good 15 minutes to drive, and Haight-Ashbury was like 2 streets about 2 blocks long at this time. We're talking about like 1967, maybe early 68. So I was 6 or 7 years old. But it would take you 15, 20 minutes to drive that 2 blocks. And then, do you want to go up the other side? Nope, don't want to. Let's go to the zoo. Okay, fine. Off we went to the San Francisco Zoo. But it was a wild time to grow up there. I mean, the protest songs were there. You know, you had Dylan, you had Joan Baez, you had, oh God, all
Country
these.
Joe and the Fish.
Country Joe McDonald. I never saw him. He was back east. But you had, I mean, and at that time, San Francisco was a music hub because you had guys like Bill Graham who ran the Fillmore and Winterland.
Yeah.
And that's where all these bands got together, you know, Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin, Big Brother and the Holding Company, before Janis went out on her own. And, you know, just Quicksilver Messenger Service. And I mean, all of these groups just coming from out of nowhere. Creedence Clearwater Revival. I mean, they formed in Oakland, California. You listen to their music, people think they're Southern boys. They're not. They're California kids.
The thing about these bands from the 60s, honestly, is that they produce a lot of music.
Oh, yeah.
And for the amount of drugs that they probably were consuming, it's quite the you know, quite the successful, you know, amount of music, because I mean, it's hard when everybody's off on some sort of crazed head trip to get something put together. John Lennon and Paul McCartney, I don't know which one said that, a reporter asked them, well, do you guys, you know, get all, you know, stoned when you, and they said, no, we tried that. And we ended up realizing that every time we did, everything we recorded was crap. So we don't do that while we're recording. Oh, that wasn't always the case, but generally the Beatles were not generally all messed up, you know.
Not while they were performing or recording or writing, but then again, you know,
they did sometimes.
Come on.
No, they did something. Well, one time, John Lennon took, I don't know how many hits of acid, and they went in to record, and they put the microphone in front of John Lennon, and they were there at Abbey Road, and John Lennon just stood in front of the microphone, and like, John, and he's just sitting there, and he says, I think I'm going to pass out. I need some air. And they took him up to the top, to the rooftop. And this was George Martin, the producer. He didn't know anything about drugs and this and that, but he took him to the rooftop, and the other Beatles were down there. And when they heard that he was at the rooftop with John high on it, they all ran up to bring him down. And he was interviewed later, George Martin, and he said, yeah, the boys came up running and to make sure that, because a lot of people have been jumping off of roofs. Yep. I had no idea. I just took them up for some good air. You know. Yep.
And you know, I got to admit, that's me. I'm so naive when it comes to that thing. And we do not condone, support, or encourage any kind of illicit use of controlled substances here at Trampled Underfoot Podcast. But we'd be naive to say that it didn't happen, because we all know what happened. I mean,
well, we're just being historical about it and conversational about it, but of course we don't condone such things, you know.
Right.
Orange juice and fajitas all the way.
I don't drink. I'm the world's biggest lightweight. I tell folks I have a 10 cent a decade habit because cold medicine puts me out, you know? So I don't even want to get on that subject because I'm the world's biggest lightweight. Just give me a cup of coffee and a bowl of ice cream and set me in the corner with the dog and I'm a happy guy, you know?
Ice cream is addictive, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I don't experiment with ice cream. I'm into full-scale research, but somebody has to carry on this vital work. So
I'll just say one last thing, which is going to be not random, but kind of not in where, you know, with the conversation we've had a little bit off. One album that to me, and it's out of place in what we usually mention with, not really, but it kind of is. In the 80s, REM, a band which I really didn't like.
I still am not much for them.
Right. I'm not much for, like, I'll listen to some of their songs, like the hit song, I'll listen, but they came out with, in my opinion, a beautiful, well worth the putting on your earphones and laying back and starting from the beginning and enjoying it to the end, a shorter album than their typical albums, and it's called Automatic for the People.
Yep.
It is a beautiful work of art, in my opinion, better than, what was that album with, like, something Angels or
I don't know.
Me in the corner. That's me in the spotlight. Losing My Religion.
I know the song that you're talking about, but I have never owned an REM album.
Okay, so this Losing My Religion album was a massive success.
Okay.
I mean, it was massive. However, in my opinion, artistically, on par with a lot of the music we've talked about today, in my opinion, Automatic for the People, that album, and it was a short album, and I purchased it, you know, I said, well, screw it, I'm going to purchase it. It was freaking awesome. The whole thing. Beautiful album. So I just wanted to throw that out there randomly.
Okay. All right. To kind of finalize this and wrap it up, you can only have one album to listen to for the rest of the year. This is only November. One album to listen to for the rest of the year. What's it going to be?
Jeepers Creepers, Where'd You Get Those Peepers by Paul Anka.
Oh, okay.
I don't know that he ever recorded that album.
I'm going to fall back to the mood that I'm in right now, Harry Chapin, Greatest Stories Live. If you ever get a chance to listen to it, listen to it. Some good storytelling in that album.
I hope that in another reality, like alternate universe, where I mentioned that song, and because of that universe's laws of physics, I have to listen to that song for the rest of the year. I hope that that's not the case.
I would be amazed if that song actually exists, but in an alternate universe, it does, and it was on the top 40.
Yeah. In an alternate universe, you're sitting here in Sweetwater, and I'm over there in Oregon.
Yeah, well, yeah, that would probably be something. Yeah, that would be. Could you imagine me in Sweetwater?
Yeah.
I can't. I really can't. I would be so lost. You would be like, oh, Mark, what a babe in the woods. Come on, son. We need to talk.
Oh, no. If you were in Sweetwater, you would probably not be thrilled, kind of like me. Because there's certain things that if you were in Sweetwater in the 80s and prior, you'd be totally okay. Well, you'd be a little bit like,
well, yeah, because I would be used to it, but
no, I'm saying like it's just too much here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a big city. I don't do big cities. I grew up around big cities. I had my fill of them. Thank you.
And it's not. Yeah, it's not fun. I wouldn't recommend it, unfortunately.
I live in an unincorporated town of 5,000 people because that's where I want to be right now. I may change my mind down the road. I don't know. But
move to the heart of New York City?
No, that ain't going to happen.
Huh?
That ain't going to happen. But
at every hour of the day and night, you have like traffic going by and bells and horns.
That ain't going to happen.
Or you could move somewhere out towards the Orient, and have like goats in the streets and clink 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 clink.
Well, I think a good note to close on is something that my wife just posted over in the chat. Said, "Okay, Eloy, if you were here, then it's your turn to take out the trash."
Oh no! See, I'm not a big one for like that being a big. How far do you have to take the trash across town? Then that's going to be a problem.
No, it's just about 50 feet down to the end of the driveway.
I can only do 49 feet, 48 feet. I don't do windows or 40 or 50 feet.
Okay.
So does it have little wheels so I could push
Yes,
it?
it has wheels.
There you go.
And rock it backwards, push it ahead of you. Yeah. All right. So I think, yeah, good grief, we've gone an hour and 20 minutes. It is my edit this week, so I can. Yeah, I know you two. And this did not seem like no hour and 20 minutes to me, because he and I get to going on music, and man, I could do this until midnight.
Dude, I've got
have.
yeah, dude. I could totally do music. It's just I love music, and I'm gonna stop because we'll just keep going.
Yeah. So
and it's not. I'm sorry. It's not just the music. It's everything that is included in the music that's awesome, dude.
Well, see, that's why I wanted to kind of touch on, because we've mentioned several times that you are a musician, but I've never really heard the whole story of how you got into it and how you got started. And that's what my questions basically were about, and to kind of try to pick the mind and see where it started, where it came from, where you hoped it would go, where it did go. And
I'm going to post a link to a song, a blues song that I did down below.
Okay.
In the thing, and leave it there.
Down in the description. Do you want to put it on our Facebook page too?
Yeah, I could do that.
Okay. Speaking of Facebook, if you haven't had enough of Trampled Underfoot here lately, Eloy just posted the link to that video in the chat. We'll go ahead and we'll put it in the description box of this video when it goes live, and we'll put it over on our Facebook page. And as I started to say, if you haven't had enough of Trampled Underfoot, you could always go over to our Facebook page, give us a like. Whenever we reference something like the video Eloy is talking about right now, we'll post it over there on our Facebook page. But we also have a website, right?
Yeah, it's called Trampled Underfoot Podcast.com. And if you want to catch some previous episodes, which we have titled and dated and all that, you could go down the list by clicking the Wayback Machine. And there's a bunch of awesome topics and stuff, and it's entertaining. So you could do that. And then, of course, we're on Spreaker, and that's Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Spreaker. So listen, if you could do us a favor for you guys, that, because I mean, you know, could you share this out to others? Let them know, hey, you might like this or not. It's not like a marriage commitment, but do that if you can, so that get a little bit.
It's a marriage commitment, man. This is, you know, with this podcast,
The moment I said that, one viewer dropped from the
okay. Roll call chat. Let's see who it was.
Roll call quickly. Who's out there?
But on a serious note, we also want to mention the Trampled Underfoot Podcast.com is sponsored by Harneal Media. Steve Nealon over at Harneal Media. He can handle all your website wants, needs, issues. Give him a shout. Harnealmedia.com. He can hook you right up. Believe me. So I guess that's about all for this week, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that that we're good. I could have gone on for with the music thing. There's so much to talk about. Frankly, I love the music topic, dude. I'm sorry. To me, it's an awesome topic. You know, it's weird because you started asking me questions. Said, "Oh crap, this is turning into some interview now." What the heck?
A little bit, but you know what? I just kind of wanted to get into the mind because, as I said, I never developed that sense of where to take something, because I didn't stick with it long enough. I probably could, but I didn't.
Oh, definitely.
So
if you want to rock, you rock.
Yeah.
I want to rock. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
That's Twisted Sister.
Yep. I was going to say Dee Schneider, but yeah. Got it. Okay. Thank you, everybody over in the chat, for sticking with us. And we didn't plug our YouTube channel, Trampled Underfoot on YouTube. Head over to the mighty YouTubes. Look for Trampled Underfoot Podcast. We record these podcast sessions Tuesday nights at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific. Come along, join us, hang out in the chat, throw us a show suggestion, talk trash about my haircut or the lack thereof. Come hang out with us, have a good time. But from now, let's just say we'll see you next week.
Hasta los huevos.
Or something.